Hi, welcome to the channel. This is the channel The Foreigner. Um, Thanks for watching. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the issue of isolation, and of course the opposite of meaning isolation, and of course the social isolation of elderly people. Elderly meaning old people, by over the age of 60, 65, 70, and more, of course, in different settings. Also talking about, of course, the death of Gene Hackman and Betsy Hackman. Recently it took place in New Mexico, and the timeline, of course, that went on for those 7 days, and the issue, of course, of starvation, dehydration, and that the last report was stating from the chief medical examiner's office in the Santa Fe, New Mexico. So, since the moment of arrival from the rescuers, from the first responder who came to that house of Gene Hackman and Betsy, and they found them. Of course, they found them dead, as we already know. And on those, in the first, moment of arrival, they didn't know what, they found bodies. I mean, the two bodies, um, in the in the living room, where the place where they found it, right? And but they didn't know what was the cause exactly and when they had passed away. And it's curious that in this report, just as a side note, right, it wasn't mentioned very some important facts uh, about the exposure to this hantavirus that is transmitted by animals, rodents, mouses, and it, this disease, which is a rare disease, of course, a very rare pulmonary disease that Betsy had contracted. This is the wife of Gene Hackman, and that the first responder weren't, they didn't know yet until that point, up to that point, that she had that disease, which is the exposure precisely of excrement, of animal excrement, rodents, like I mentioned before, rodent excrement, urine, and of course drops. And then they didn't know, of course. I'm sure that's, as we all know, all first responders, they use gloves, they protect themselves, of course. But what about if there were any excrements nearby in the vicinity? Because the report is saying, it does mention the report that there was there were evidence, I'm quoting, evidences of rodent excrements, in the vicinity. There were evidence that entry of rodents, free entry meaning, from outside, of course, uh, of animals coming in and out, I mean, and leaving there the excrements, of course, and the in the vicinity and on the floor, of course. So there was the, I'm quoting, there was evidence of that. But at that point, first responders are not really trained to do. I mean, ambulance workers, first responders, they're not really trained to. They don't have a mobile lab to test what is on the floor. Of course, that's not the initial, point of, initial work for response. If it's a crime scene, or it's done, after that. But at that point, most likely, I mean, what if they were, exposed to that, those residues of urine, excrements, and because what the report is saying is that there was evidence of rodents, animals coming in and out, of course, and there were, the excrements were there, most likely. So that's one of the, intriguing issues. And of course, there was no quarantine meaning, like, that if they had known before, if they had known that Miss Betsy had that illness, that disease, they had quarantine, or or even clean, or clean the house properly. Well, with wash, at least 10% of 10% that is required, just like washing in a facility when the COVID-19 took place, that people had to wash constantly. So if they had known that she had that disease, the pulmonary, disease, which was transmitted from the animal to human, but not human to human, just from animal to human, of course. But so if they had known that fact, of course, they had to they were supposed to take different measures to not to expose the first responders to that kind of disease, which is very fatal. And what they're saying is that knowing the fact that they had at least 1 to 7 cases a year in the New Mexico state for the last 5 years, meaning, and the survival rate is only like between 40 to 50% survival rate. I think the exact number was 42% survival rate, which means that it's very, and of course it's required to report to the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. It's required to report, to have a full report of when that kind of case appears or that kind of case has been treated in any state, not just in New Mexico, but in any state. So by law, it's required to have a full report of any case of hantavirus disease, which is transmitted by rodents and animals. So that was done, of course, but it was done almost like 3 weeks until they had done all the testing, which is 3 weeks after when the forced arrival came to the house to do their work, to extract the bodies and take them to the medical examiner's office. So that's one of the facts that is very intriguing, how that took place. If they are still in observation, I mean the people at risk, forced responders, if they were, how much they were at risk. That those many questions that weren't asked. There was not more time in the press conference, of course, but that needs to be a follow-up, just in case any of the first responders were exposed to any excrement at the facility, at the house, inside the house there. So now taking into account that, now switching a little bit to what took place, that Betsy, the wife, died first. We know that the 11. They concluded that the last activity, of any email, answers, or any communications, technological communication, meaning email or cell phone data, everything that was investigated, it took place the 11. So they have concluded that after all the activities she had, going to the veterinary office, to the pharmacy to get some food for the dog. Apparently the dog was a little, ill, and so they were taking care of, one of the dogs that was ill too. That already, the dog was dead too, because the dog was in a crate, and most likely it did die from starvation. The first initial statement was that maybe perhaps the dog could have taken some pills that was carried around the house, but if it was inside a crate, right, there's no possibility of that. But 7 days later, with no food or water, the dog must have, died of hunger. I mean, So now switching a little, keep digging more into it, how they die. I mean, the death of Betsy, the wife, died. First we know that, but it sounds like it was quicker in a way that. After she collapsed, right? After she collapsed, she was not. I mean, she is younger than, of course, Gene Hackman, and knowing that, even if she was still after collapsing, if she was still alive after collapsing, of course, because it wasn't a heart attack. There's no evidence of heart attack for her. She could have tried to reach her cell phone, to reach or crawl to the door, like I said, for help and scream for help and try to get out the house, even crawling or make an effort to get, but apparently, so there was not much of it wasn't like in a process of being for days, in a coma or situation. So that's the most likely evidence according to the report. So knowing that, if she died in the first day, the 11th, late night or maybe early in the morning, the 12th, the February 12th, Gene Hackman wasn't dead yet. And Gene Hackman had with the pacemaker activity all the way through the 18th. That's where the pacemaker activity of his heart was, known to be still active. meaning, sending signals. And there was activity according to the report and what they thought when they spoke with Gene Hackman cardiologist. So he was alive for 7 more days after the wife passed away. So the big question about how was he able to have his daily activities going. Daily activities meaning, she's dead, nobody else is at home, of course, total social isolation from the world, from the planet. Think about this. I mean, socially isolated, this couple, famous celebrities, total isolation from the planet, from the rest of the world, like without no people knowing what was going on inside the house. I mean, friends, hello, where are the friends? Family members, relatives, nephews, even medical professionals. I mean, there has to be there, in a condition like that, don't they medical professional make calls? I mean, in a weekly basis in that kind of condition, in a for a 95 years old with different with Alzheimer and different heart condition. So this is happening in the biggest, most powerful country in the world, where there is no shortage of food so far. As far as I know, there's plenty of reserve of food, of course. I mean, going through for somebody, of course, they were very careful in this report, right? In this press conference from these, officers, of state officers, to mention the word starvation. I mean, to use the word starvation. But one of the reporters was asking, what about starvation? Is there any indication of there was any, hunger? I mean, starvation, that Gene Hackman died of starvation. I mean, there was the question, lightly asked, not profoundly, not like there wasn't any follow-up to the question, which could have done deeper. Digging deeper, of course, they had no answer, but the answer was, and I quote, this is from the answer from the Chief Medical Examiner's Office of Santa Fe. The answer, I quote, that he had, she says, the doctor, that he had, that no food in his stomach. There's no evidence that there was no evidence. There's no food in his stomach. And that he had it not eating recently. That he had not eaten recently. That he had not eaten recently. I mean, if he had no food in his stomach and not eaten recently, how recently that could have been? I mean, recently meaning days, weeks. Recently could mean anything. Recently could mean, days, but there was no food on his, when the autopsy was performed, wide open body, of course, there was nothing. There was nothing. And that they believe he had not eaten recently. Recently could be 7 days. Since the day that the wife passed away, Betsy, he had not eaten, most likely. This is starvation. I mean, there's, starvation, plainly. Let's use the word starvation. I mean, in the most powerful country in the world, it's just amazing. I mean, when we use starvation, the word starvation, don't we just use starvation in third world countries, Africa, some Latin American countries, Somalia? I mean, of course, starvation, because, of course, to use, even for the media, to use starvation, a headline, think about the New Mexico's, all News Mexico's, big news media, LA Times, the Miami Herald, New York Times, a headline, starvation in New Mexico. Gene Hackman died of starvation. That's a shame it's a shame for all of us. I mean, to know that somebody can die of starvation in a Western country, in a first class Western country, of course. But this is not to blame anybody. Look, the idea of somebody dying of dehydration or starvation is no food. I mean, no, of hunger, of course. Of course, it's shame for society as a whole. It's not legally, of course, nobody's saying somebody's legally responsible for somebody dying of starvation, but morally, we all as a society we're responsible. Somebody dying of starvation, whether this is one of the most legendary, famous celebrities like Gene Hackman, or somebody dying in Somalia, Africa, In anywhere in Africa or Latin America, somebody in Haiti, people dying of starvation in some cases, right? As a society, aren't we morally, responsible? I mean, somehow, not guilt, but somehow morally responsible to other fellow human beings, right? So starvation is most likely. Let's get clear here. Starvation is more likely here, and that's the reason I'm using for the fourth or fifth time, because I just called, right? No food in his stomach, and he had not eaten recently, meaning recently could have been 7 days, 8 days, 10 days. That's recently, coming in the, So, and of course, in the issue of Gene Hackman's, um, that there is no evidence of dehydration according to the report, and I'm quoting, no evidence, no clear evidence of dehydration. Oh, but isn't a contradiction that the report says that, but he had poor kidney function. Don't we know that kidney function requires lots of water? Yes, we do need. If our body is almost 60-70% water, I mean, we need water, and guess what? The kidney is the one doing the work. The function of filtering, the clearing up the water, whatever, and function, and to spread to all the water we need is the kidney. The kidney is the gate of our body, so we can function, so we don't die of dehydration. A clear water, I mean, the water we drink, of course, through the kidney. I mean, we all know that. I mean, that's nothing new. There's nothing, no mystery to it. But the idea that, according to the statement I'm quoting here, that says that no evidence of dehydration. Oh, but guess what? But he had poor kidney function. So if there's no, positive, no optimum, no, good normal kidney function. So what was the cause for for poor kidney function? No water. I think, this is just clear, as clear as there's lack of water. Think about it. I mean, lack of water. Totally, there's no other way to describe. I mean, no other way to explain. That's one of the main issue. If there is poor kidney function, there's no water. That's as clear as that, and we all know that. So, the report, I mean, there are some conclusive issues about timeline, about what went on, what for those 7 days. I mean, the idea of who arrived first, how was, everything was done, the work that was done, of course. And if he was like able to, just in case, right, just let's talk about if he was able to at least move around, right? Move around meaning he was alive for 7 more days, right? What he could have, if he was able to grab a sandwich, let's say, for a piece of bread somewhere, I mean, to survive for another 7 days, or water, right? He could have used the phone, right? He could, at the same token, right? And most phone, of course, is by the bedside, right? The table we have, the lamp, the night lamp that you have, night lighting. Of course, usually there is a permanent phone also, and cell phone people take, all over they go, of course. But there was no 911 call. There was no indication of any activity or to ask for help, or if he was screaming for help, nobody could hear him. I mean, in a so isolated place, and isolated from society as a whole. From while all this is going on, of course, the remark of the natural causes. Of course, natural causes. If she died, the conclusive report says that she died of natural causes, and of course he died of natural causes, right? But natural causes is more, in my own experience, when you do comfort care. That's why the social isolation. That's why I'm trying to put a parallel here and compare what exactly natural causes is and what a social isolation, which in this case is obvious that nobody cared. I mean, friends, family, these authorities. I mean, nobody really neighborhood watch. I mean, there was neighborhood, even in a neighborhood like that. There was people who, they have like a neighborhood watch, team that, of course, they patrol the area. What about constable, right? That patrol the area, just looking, to see if everything is normal, right? But talking about what's the issue of social isolation, which is obvious in this case. Even the children, I mean, the children were, after the news went on, the news came out that they're there, right? The children were spotted in going for breakfast with apparently a smile. I don't know what kind of smile, with a smile. That's what, was spotted, and going, for breakfast in another location I think it's in California. And so it's what I'm talking about, the comfort care and social isolation. I'm gonna comfort care, in my own experience, working at a nursing home, which I did. I was sometimes assigned to a special area, special area where comfort care patients, comfort care residents at a nursing home facility took place. And when I was assigned, in my case, in my experience, assigned to that area, in which I had to attend people dying in the last stage of dying, 2 days left, 3 days left, when everything was done for that resident, elderly residents, 90 years old, 75, 80. I mean, most residents with 4-stage cancer in the last minute. People, I mean, patients who were discharged from hospitals, of course. When comfort care, meaning everything medical, the scientific community, the medical community has done everything they had to do to rescue that, I mean, to care for that person, to bring them back to life, but they are still alive. They're still, maybe their eyes moving, their hands might be moving, slightly. They're still alive. So the comfort care is the last stage, the last 48 hours, sometimes the last 24 hours of life, 72 hours of life. Sometimes it could be a week, but it doesn't last a week. Sometimes, most of the time, because everything that the doctor had to do, they had done it for this patient. So when I was assigned to that unit, comfort care unit, as a nurse's aide, of course, because you had the nurses coming, doctors coming, still coming. I mean, they giving medication. They're still giving medication, liquid medication. They have, in some cases IV, some not. Sometimes IV doesn't work anymore. I mean, comfort care is just comforting. That the word says comfort. My job was basically to have like a napkin, a wet napkin, and the dry, because in the last, typically in the last 24 hours before dying, the person, reflects a drying lips, and of course, the mouth, the nose, something like a whitish come from the nose too, especially if it's the liver disease, right? And of course, comfort care means that even the cleanup and holding hands, basically holding hands. And I was there for minutes, sometimes for 10, 15 minutes, just holding hands and drying, and of course, applying a wet towel onto their mouth, just to have, so they don't dry, precisely, so they don't die of dehydration. So try to put some liquid. If the liquid is refused from the mouth, of course, just like giving, a wet towel to the lips, basically. And of course, cleaning up part, because they're still defecating. I mean, you have to turn over and do the cleaning. Of course, the cleaning of their, the cleaning part, of course, not the full shower. They're in bed. I mean, they're almost about to die, but that doesn't mean that they don't have to be, cleaned properly. So as a nurse say, that's my job. That was my job, to clean them up properly and carefully, because a person who has hours to live, you can't just move them around too much. I mean, carefully. We're trained for that. Of course, I needed sometimes it takes two assists. Two assists meaning one more person to assist, most likely. So between two assists, two nurses, two aides doing the job is professionally done and done properly and in good standing. So that's comfort care means, that humans, people around the person in the process of dying. Yes, that's the process of dying. And when the person expires, a few residents expired on my hand, holding hands like this. I mean, I was holding hands, and of course, it's still warm after the person dies. It's still warm. It's not the body still warm because the blood is still recently, but the mouth of course get wide open, stick wide open, like no movement at all. So even the we are wearing moist, giving moist to the lips, but it's total. It gets it wide open, and the eyes wide open, staring straight, no movement at all, no movement. So basically, when that happened, it's done. It's the person has expired basically. But of course, it wasn't my job to if I noticed that that's what is happening. Or from my experience, I know after gaining some experience, I knew that that it's dead, it's done, right? But I had to notify the nurse, my supervisor, my head nurse, notify, and the head nurse will come, and she will do the closing, of course, of the eye, closing the eyes, and then post-mortem care will begin after the doctor comes, of course. First the doctor will come and pronounce legally dead, legally, decease the person. Of course, there's a big procedure, right? It takes hours. And then, of course, the whole process of family member notifying it, of course, family members are aware of what's going on. They're full communication with family members, friends, with the doctor, with the everything, full communication with this process, in the process of comfort care, which is process of dying. That's the process of dying. If you hear, just in case you hear for the first time about this term, process of dying. That's what it is in the nursing home facility, which I was I was working for 3 years, and I was assigned sometimes for that unit, and I took care, of course, post-mortem care too, which I'm going to talk about in another video because it's long, right? But of course, after this process has done, the person declared passed away, the death on the scene. I mean, this is a medical facility. The doctors, yes, declares. It doesn't have. There is no need to take the body to a hospital to declare that. The doctors declare right there. I mean, yeah, because the doctor comes, of course. There's a doctors always in the facility, and so comfort case is opposite, definitely opposite, because is opposite to social isolation, which in this case took place. In this case, for 7 days of, it must have been a torture, must have been a suffering forever. Not able, dying of hunger, dying of mental, psychological, the psychological mindset of watching it's a horror movie. This is the worst terror movie that anybody can witness or can live. I mean, all his life he was acting. He was the actor of many mystery movies, horror, some maybe little horror movies. But this is the worst case scenario for an actor to, the last day of his life, revere and applauded for millions of people, loved. I mean, they say that, and as a society we fail. I mean, we just, as a society, don't we, as a whole, as a society, I'm not saying just in the United States, in the Western country, but as a society as a whole, how we treat each other, how we, as a human being, how we have, don't we have to review our human connections, our social nesting where we live, how we treat the elderly, whether the elderly is a wealthy person or celebrity or not. I mean, how we go along, and it seems normal. After this report, even the journalists, of course, most American, journalists who knows about, they have done previous report of that, but there was no concern about, what's next. I mean, what could they could have asked, what could we do as a society so this doesn't happen again? There was no question about, which means that it's going to happen again. In that press conference, there was no question from those journalists, from those reporters, asking the most important question. And that's why I'm asking the question openly. Please drop me a comment about what I'm saying right now. Why they didn't ask the question? The main question is not the technicality. A cold report, the scientific report, which is for nothing now. I mean, for nothing meaning it's not going to save Betsy and Gene Hackman. It's not going to bring this report is not going to bring them to life, back to life. Definitely, it's not going to bring. We learn a little bit about hantavirus, about we heart disease, a little more about heart disease, Alzheimer's. We know Alzheimer's disease, but the biggest question here is, what could we do as a society so this, what happened to this famous couple, Gene Hackman and Betsy Hackman, it doesn't happen again? There was no question about that. What about your editorial, LA Times, Miami Herald? What about the editorials? Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Can somebody write an editorial page on the, at least in the editorial page, what could we do as a society so this doesn't happen again? So we just leave it as is, as well. Okay, so you are on your own, right? Privacy doctrine, right? You are, save yourself. Whatever happens, happens. I mean, you are your own, make your own decision. Of course, one of the most treasured is the right to privacy. You have the right, of course, privacy. But as a society, I mean, aren't we supposed to, check each other for other human beings, whether this is celebrity or not? I mean, what about Christian organization? Is there a church in the area there? A Christian church that could have said, oh, I'm going to knock the door. I'm going to do something. I'm going to ring the bell, but nobody answers. Well, that don't they sometimes, Christian communities, they send people to visit? This is the Great Commission. This is the Great Commission in the Bible from Jesus Christ. Go and preach and go spread the word. Somebody could have a Christian. If there was any Christian in that area, hello? I mean, of course they are. Where are you guys, Christian pastors? Where are you? How come nobody went to knock? I'm not blaming you guys. I mean, pastors, with all due respect, brother Christians, wherever you are in New Mexico. All I'm saying that as a society as a whole, I'm not just saying one particular group of persons. As a society, are we all morally? And I'm going to finish with this video by saying that, aren't we morally responsible with something when something like this happens? People dying of starvation in a first-class society, first-class, industrial society, rich meaning wealth everywhere. Come on, food everywhere in abundance. I mean, they may die as starving. I mean, in the case of Gene Hackman. So just a little reflection today. So thanks for watching again, and hopefully we keep learning something every day about situations like this that affects mostly elderly after 65, 70, and there are millions more American, hundreds of thousands more Americans and Europeans, Canadians, anywhere everywhere in the world, even Latin America, Asia, Africa. Of course, the culture is a little different because elderly are. I'm not saying elderly have value and not doesn't have but the situation, the concept of we should review the concept of the doctrine of privacy doctrine. How far can you be private? What about any law requiring somebody 85-year-old with a Alzheimer's condition, any law that New Mexico can allow, with this, if we learn something that can require a life alert, that can issue a signal maybe, to somebody to come for rescue. I mean, of course, there are technology for that, right? But maybe the issue of privacy still, if the patient doesn't want, the person doesn't reject, they have yes, they do have the ability and the right to reject that kind of, devices, of course. So, but there's still more we can do in some cases, in many more cases, in which if there's a law enacted that could have, saved these lives. So thanks again for watching, guys. And thanks, again, if you have, give thumbs up. It helps. It does help in the algorithm, of course. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe if you like this content. Take care and see you in the next video, guys. Bye bye.